Sometimes there are events that really shake the world. They're existential kind of events. Well, we've had them now, we meaning the world, the Middle East, Jews, Arabs, Muslims, Christians, Israelis, Palestinians. Well, we've been having them almost nonstop. But last night was another one. Last night was very dramatic and lots of paradoxes. So last night in Washington, D.C., right near the Capitol, apparently right near the FBI building, is a Jewish museum in DC. Was an event hosted by the Israeli embassy and by an organization called the American Jewish Committee. And I think it was when the event was over, a man came in and started shooting. And a couple that was killed were a young couple who were about to get married in Israel. And they were actually about to head back. And her name was Sarah. His name was Yaron. She's an American citizen. He's an Israeli. The paradox is, let's start with some. The evening event was to raise money for humanitarian aid across the bridge. In other words, for Palestinians and Israelis, it was meant to be not only a pragmatic thing, but symbolic. So that happens. And just on the end of that, just afterwards, a guy named Elias Rodriguez, 32 years old, comes in and starts shooting. I don't know at this moment what the weapon was. He's from Chicago. And again, a paradox, people from the audience or people who were attending were offering him water. They didn't know that he was the shooter at that moment. And then when he was arrested, I don't know how quickly it was, he yelled, free, free Palestine. Now, did he do anything that will help the Palestinians? Well, that's a rhetorical question. Obviously, the answer is no. And so what we have are lots of paradoxes. Here's another one. On the same day that this happened, or maybe the day before, there was a march, a rally by a group in Israel, which I support, called Stand Together. And Stand Together is really a unique organization. It's Jews and Arabs in Israel, so Arab citizens of Israel and Jewish Israeli citizens of Israel, working together side by side using three languages, Hebrew, Arabic, and English, and doing lots of activist kinds of things. One of the leaders was arrested at the demonstration, and I had met him at these events. They're completely nonviolent. They're not anti-Zionist. They're not anti-Israel at all. They're trying to get Israel on a path. Now, does that in any way, what's going on in Gaza, does that in any way justify what happened last night? Again, a rhetorical question. Obviously not. Obviously not. But does what happened last night justify what Netanyahu is doing in Gaza? Not. Obviously not. We have a stalemate. We have a worldwide stalemate about things like this. We've lost our moral compass. I used to feel a lot of identity with the country as a whole of Israel. Now, the identity and the affiliation is with Am Yisrael, the people of Israel, which doesn't just mean citizens of Israel, it means the whole Jewish world as one unity. Does the whole Jewish world come together all the time? No, absolutely not. But in things like this, usually and mostly it does. Because this goes right to the heart of vulnerability. Jews, even in America, even with quite a long time of stability, appreciation, acceptance, not just acceptance, but we've been able to really thrive, still feel vulnerable. And there's good reasons for that. And it's not it's not only the Holocaust from 75 years ago. And it's not only the long, long history of anti-Semitism over 2,000 years, let's say. We've seen that before. It's also that there's also lots and lots of antipathy towards Jews, even today, even in the United States. And is it getting worse since Trump made headlines, since Trump took power, and since his people? Yes, that's another rhetorical question. But even in America, the sense about antipathy and vulnerability goes like this. Of all the religions in the United States, it's fabulous that we have freedom of religion and we have no established religion, although some Christian nationalists say that we are, but clearly we're not in our founding. Only Jewish institutions have to have security at every single Jewish institution, synagogues, Jewish community centers, events like last night. No other group that I can think of has had that much hate crimes directed against them. Yes, there have been hate crimes against Muslims, but it hasn't been as consistent or as widespread, as far as I know, as it has been with Jewish communities. So even two different synagogues that I've gone to here in Lexington area, Boston area, both of them have security people. It's not people carrying guns or anything like that, but it's people checking, informally on everybody who comes in. That's not a great thing. That's not a feeling of security. So getting back to the existential crisis, here's this event. It takes place right in downtown DC, right near all the federal US buildings. Like I said, right near the FBI building. And yet this guy was able to get into that building, the Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C., even though he had been apparently pacing in front of the museum, looking to see what was going on. Obviously, one thinks that should have been picked up by the security people. There were security people. So, but you can't have perfect security ever, anywhere. Surveillance cameras, the whole thing. And we don't want to live, I don't want to live in a police state or in a state where the sense of freedom, but that's a balancing act. We've had lots and lots and lots of reasons, not just on the Israel-Gaza thing, but for so many reasons. So another paradox is this, that as we get closer to the possibility of a settlement, there's going to be more violence leading up to it, and especially from the Israeli side. So the ultimate paradox, I should have got this first, is Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government, because the Israeli country of Israel is not solely meant to be, a central point for Israelis. It's meant to be a focus for Jews all over the world. And it's meant that with the state of Israel, that we would feel more secure all over the world, all over the Jewish world, less vulnerable, less alone, less isolated. And that with the state of Israel, which has become a very strong, powerful state, we would have worldwide recognition and respect, let's say. And the other thing is that those of us who were really Jewish consciousness all these years, we thought that if things got bad, that the Israeli government or the Mossad or some entity would give aid, whether it had to be even a level of military aid, arms, underground, so to speak. But we're beyond that. Things are beyond that. And what instead, the paradox is that because Netanyahu is Trump 2.0, I call him, because he's not going to stop, because he's doing this now as a war of revenge, which is not a good strategy. What he's done has not only made Israel now a pariah state almost uniformly across the world, including our former allies in Western Europe, and of course, questions about the US, which is stuck by, but they can't do it forever. And should an ally just be a blank check? Well, what about the famous campaign of Mothers Against Drunk Driving? What was the slogan? Friends don't let friends drive drunk. Let me say that again. Friends don't let friends drive drunk. I don't even need to ask a rhetorical question. And yet, Mothers of Drunk Driving, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, have been incredibly successful. And people know that slogan, and many people do adhere to it. What's the context? What's the analogy? Clearly, Joe Biden should have put his foot down much, much sooner. And what do I mean by putting his foot down? One, reducing or stopping the flow of arms at that time, and still the American government should, and being much more direct, and much more open in criticizing what was going on. Would Netanyahu listen? Maybe that's a rhetorical question. I think the answer is no. I think he believes, and some people like him believe, look, nobody likes us anyway. Nobody gives a shit about Jews. There's always been anti-Semitism. We can do it ourselves. We don't really have allies. That is a bunch of shit. And why? Well, one, there's plenty of reasons and ways to prove that it's not correct at all. The EU has been allied, US, Canada, and so forth. And two, the purpose of creating the state was not to be a new ghetto. It was not to create a modern day ghetto. It was to have Jews have power, to have agency, to direct their own future, to be able to define themselves, to recreate their language, Hebrew, to create a new identity, to create a Jewish working class, an army, all kinds of stuff. It wasn't meant to see that we had to be a fortress. We wanted to live, the idea was to live, hopefully, with peace with neighbors. Israelis, Jewish settlers, the founders made a lot of mistakes. But there were a lot of mistakes on both sides. I don't see it one way. Way too many people see it one way, but we're going to get back to Netanyahu. I knew on the day, October 7th, I called my brother up, who lives in Sweden, and we both agreed two things: that Israel was going to become a pariah because we knew that there would be a war of revenge. And so the worldwide support, worldwide empathy or worldwide support, solidarity with Israel, which lasted for at least a month or more, maybe more than a month, would be destroyed. We knew that. And the other thing we knew, rhetorical question, was there would be an outpouring, an overwhelming outpouring of anti-Semitism, which means Jew hatred, which means prejudice against Jews, which means violence against Jews, and so forth, across the world. So, is Netanyahu acting in the best interests of Israel and or worldwide Jews, worldwide Jewry, Am Yisrael? No. And he would be taken out of office if he stopped the war. because he's been investigated for many, many, many corrupt acts. And also the way that attack happened on October 7th. Israel was like vulnerable. It was existential partly because of that the myth of Israeli invulnerability was killed that day, along with 1,500 civilians, Israeli civilians, in horrible ways. So it's been a tragedy. It's been a travesty. And the question is, how do we get things on a good path? One, Jews in the diaspora, which in the exile, have to be very united and very tough and demand accountability from their neighbors, such as the Christian churches. I've been amazed that liberal Christian churches, enlightened Christian communities, have not really said anything. They're standing by. And that's an outrage. That is an outrage. They have a responsibility in so many ways. And then there's these groups that call themselves the Christian Zionists. And they're basically, let's not say uniformly, but they're basically evangelicals, fundamentalists, people who take the Bible literally, people who believe that they want Jews to gather in Israel, which will fill out not the promised land, but the apocalypse, apocalyptic ideas. And that as a result of that, Jews will, in a sense, not exist anymore. And Jesus would come back. I believe that's the thought. Anyway, the bottom line of it is that from a Jewish point of view, they do not have our actual interests at heart. What they do is they're an additional and maybe even stronger lobby for support to Israel from the US government. For example, Trump said that he decided to move the embassy finally to Jerusalem, which was a good act. It was long coming because of Christian Zionists, the right-wing Christian community, which is much, much larger than the number of Jews in the United States or anywhere. So getting back to these paradoxes and these contradictions, how is it that highly educated university students in the United States and all over the place see this in a simple way, in a simplistic way? Basically, the simplistic way is this, that in all situations, in all conflicts, those who are stronger are automatically the oppressor and are automatically at fault. And those who are weaker are automatically not at fault, are in the right, and therefore being oppressed. And therefore, you have to side with them. There's no rational or legitimate or moral philosophy that goes along with that accepts that. It's absurd on its face. Also, there's been, a tendency clearly to want to use slogans, to make politics with slogans and not go much further. Another thing is that it's one thing for countries or individuals or organizations to, let's say, boycott even or protest against Israeli government stuff, but it's totally not legitimate to protest against Israeli singers or poets or theater companies or writers or anything, or lecturers or professors. And that has happened all over the place, including in the US. And then the biggest issue, I want to end with this, because this I have no doubt about. I'm not in any way hesitant to say this. I'm not in any way even-handed about this at all. There was absolutely no justification and is no justification for people to blame Jews outside of Israel for what the Israeli government is doing. Let me say that again. There is no excuse for hatred, attacks, anti-Semitic slogans of any kind against Jews in the diaspora, in exile. We collectively have basically no influence on what the government of Israel does. And in fact, does the Israeli public have a lot of influence at this point? We're not sure. There's a large percentage of Israelis who are against what's going on now. I'm not sure if it's a majority. I know that almost all the families of the hostages have been against what Netanyahu is doing, refusing to continue a ceasefire, all of that stuff. So how does one in the diaspora have an influence and have the opportunity or the right or the absurdity of being blamed for what's going on there? Well, it's just knee-jerk prejudice, bigotry, racism against Jews, stereotyping, all of the above. Totally illegitimate. And early on in the movements that were protesting what the government, Israeli government, military was doing, I, sort of looked into one of the groups that sounded like it was good, called If Not Now. And these are Jewish Americans, mostly in their 20s, 30s, 40s, younger than me, who were, getting active and have still been active on presenting a different approach and on being very activist against what the Israeli government is doing. And I told them right at the beginning, it's back in October, November of 2023, I told them that I knew from the past, I thought I had some wisdom to offer. I'm 74 years old. I've been through the anti-Vietnam War stuff, through Black Power movement stuff, through the feminist movement stuff, through all kinds of stuff. And what I've seen with all those things is the natural tendency, or the unfortunate tendency, for the people who are most active to become fanatics, to become dogmatic, to become extreme. And don't count me in at that point. Don't count me in. Don't count me in as an apologist for any of those groups that become extreme. And so that's what's happened, of course, here on this issue. And what I told them, or tried to tell them, the Jewish folks, and If Not Now, was you better make sure from the beginning that you won't rationalize in any way or accept in any way, and that you would really make it an issue and be very clear in your message to people who you think are allies, because they feel the same way about Israel-Palestine. But you have to be clear that they don't in any way have optics or any way some even small versions of anti-Jewish or stereotyping or showing antipathy. So whether it's an Israeli visiting professor or all kinds of things. And it's definitely bullshit when people say that at Columbia, it wasn't true that there were anti-Semitic acts. That's not true. There were. And other places too. And anybody who knew anybody at these places knew that was true. So there was a latent feeling against Jews, not among most people. I don't know, let's say maybe 10%. And maybe only 70% of the people who got involved with the encampments. Antipathy that was, antipathy against Jews that was ready to explode, ready to emerge. And it did very quickly, way before Israeli outrages started. At Harvard, there were 17 groups, 17 student groups that signed on to a Hamas support pledge, or at least a total attack accusing Israel of genocide way before that was on the horizon, or that was present, right within 4 days, I think, of October 7th. So it was waiting to happen. It was waiting to happen. And those people who are well-meaning and who've been sitting on the sidelines, or who are our allies, who are indifferent, they need to get their shit together. They need to show solidarity with the Jewish community. And the Jewish community needs to show solidarity with itself. And Israelis and Jews everywhere ought to and need to show solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza, West Bank, and everywhere. We could share the land. We can share a common identity or a common future, which would be much better than a fortress. And it can be done. It's not going to have to be a merged country. It can be whether 2 states or some other solution. But I've covered a lot of things, and I know some people will be upset that I've gone off subject about what happened last night. I believe that Elias Rodriguez turned himself in, essentially, allowed himself to be arrested, got rid of his gun because he knew he'd be killed otherwise. And why would he want to stay alive? Well, maybe he thinks he'll become a symbol, a positive symbol, so to speak, or a supported symbol among a lot of other people. And that he would be carrying on a message of free Palestine, of a red kafia, and so forth. And unfortunately, that probably will happen. That probably will happen. We have lost our moral compass. We've lost our moral compass. And I say it's time to get it back together and to recover, if we can, from this existential crisis. Thank you. L'chaim, Am Yisrael Chai, Shalom.